Singh has been, thank you. Again, I want to say one more time, it is my honor to welcome Professor Jasjit Singh. Professor Jasjit Singh has been at NCED since 2004, where he is now Professor of Strategy and the Paul Dubrul Chaired Professor of Sustainable Development. Sorry about that. His focus areas are sustainability strategy, inclusive business, innovation, impact entrepreneurship, impact investing, and impact evaluation. Jasjit has written numerous widely recognized research articles, practitioner articles, and case studies. He's an associate editor at Management Science and also serves on the editorial review boards of Strategic Management Journal and Organization Science. Jasjit earned a PhD in business economics strategy at Harvard Business School and a master's in economics at Harvard University, having earlier obtained a BTech at IIT Delhi and a dual MS at Georgia Tech. Again, it is my honor to introduce Professor Jasjit Singh.
Shani, thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's always a pleasure to talk to this group, which I do a few times every year, and it's a special occasion when I get this chance, because this is always a passionate next generation. Sorry, I'm getting a feedback on this one. I'm going to see if I can just turn it off. Yep. Sorry about that. So the conversation I want to have today, as Shani mentioned, was on the topic of pursuing impactful careers. And I teach topics related to how to have an impact while having a career, especially related to social impact and sustainability here at INSEAD, which is a business school. And I'd like to have a conversation with you in that regard. But before I start, maybe I'll ask you, just as a warm-up for starting our chat, if you don't mind, in the chat, staying focused on the topic rather than talking about different things. Can you just in one line type how would you define what is a successful career to you? What does career success means to you? When you say somebody has a successful career, or you are having a successful career, what does it mean? And just put it in a chat. This is not a question for a discussion verbally, but just very quickly. Happiness, making change, impact poor people, passion, hard work, financial independence, fulfillment, financial stability, satisfaction, balance, career success, independence, discipline. So that's great. Lots of different perspectives. Obviously, money is part of it, but, people are mentioning many things, some of which actually relate to this whole topic of impact that we normally say. So let me ask a second question, which is related to my first one. Imagine now for you personally, for you to have had an impactful career, right? Because that's the topic for the day, pursuing impactful career. For you, if somebody told you, hey, imagine yourself in 15 years and that you're having a lot of impact. Can you describe in one line, what does that mean? So if you're having a lot of impact in 15 years, can you share a little bit about what kind of impact would it be? What if your life goes well, things fall into place, you get to have the kind of career that you want, what would you like to be accomplishing 15 years from now? Top leader in marketing, money, social and economic impact. Yeah, but I mean, people are mentioning impact as answer, but elaborate a little bit. What kind of impact? Is it about environment? Is it about society? Is it about gender empowerment? Is it about inclusion? You can imagine a lot of different kinds of impact that you could have. Community, equality, providing assistance to people, climate, environment, health system, educator, public health, entrepreneurship, youth and children, employment, and so on. So that's great. Human rights, poverty alleviation, more environment. So it's great. People have a variety of passions, and I really hope that you will keep the passion alive, and I hope the Aspire program will play an important part in your journey as well. So, as the answers start coming in, let me share my screen and share some introductory remarks before we get into the assigned case study for the day. I'm assuming you can see my screen, and so I'm going to get started with that here. Okay, great. So welcome once more, and let me start, with a few general thoughts. And as you'll notice, we will anchor a lot of our discussion around the case discussion as the case that was assigned today. And as Shani had promised, we'll have a random subset of you have the opportunity to come participate through video and audio, and all of the rest through chats and some polls that we'll have. So stay tuned. I want to start with this, definition that I find, or this quote that I find very inspiring about this notion of success. And I fully recognize that, for a lot of us, our families might be, struggling with the basics, and, we have to make sure that our families have, appropriate standard of living, and just basic things like education, food, health are taken care of. But the reality also is, once you reach a certain level of success, um, what becomes a motivator for people is not just the money, right? And I want you to imagine yourself having achieved enough financial independence that you have the liberty to ask what's next. And here, this quote is very inspiring. People may spend their whole lives climbing the ladder of success only to find, once they reach the top, that the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. And the meaning here is that, for sure, certain degree of financial independence is something that's important for all of us. But we should be careful not to go to a point of making that the sole objective in life, because if you make money the goal, it's a goal that's never enough. There's always somebody else who'll have more money than you, and it's one of those goals that doesn't fully satisfy all sides of us as human beings, right? Because we human beings have a lot of capabilities, and certainly making more money is not necessarily the only goal that most of us would find as having succeeded, being the metric. So in particular, the conversation we're having today is impact. And many of us, I would think, most of us have positive impact in society in some ways. Some of you are having positive impact by just helping your family, helping your friends, helping your siblings, doing something in your community. You might be volunteering sometimes for nonprofits. Those of us who have the additional financial resources, some of us might be giving to charities and so on. Here's a picture of, on my slide, some people volunteering for beach cleaning, removing plastic waste and so on from beaches to make them look pristine again and so on. And, that kind of impact, of course, has its value. But the other conversation that I think is important, and we don't do enough, is we take it for granted that impact is not something that happens in our everyday job, right? So a lot of people end up thinking of their careers as, well, a job is just to make money. I go to the office 9 to 5, and then real life starts in the evening and on the weekends, whether it's, me enjoying life or me giving back to society. That is something that is very often not a part of my job. But I want you to think a little bit, push yourself, just for the next hour on, okay, is there a way that I can also use my impact, my career, as a way of having impact? And in particular, I'll encourage you to look up this website. It's called 80,000hours.org. It's a very nice website. It comes within this broader movement of effective altruism. And the idea is, how are we most effective in contributing back to the world? And the argument that these people have, and they make this book available, by the way, for free on their website. I think you can go and download, and the website also has a lot of other resources on having an impactful career. But one of the points that they make is, look, on average, human beings around the world have about 40 years of working life, full-time working life, if you are in a office job kind of environment. and on average, you work 2,000 hours every year. So you have 80,000 hours of working life. Do you really want to have a career where that 80,000 hours just feels like, oh, I just go there, I don't enjoy it too much, I don't contribute much, that's just to pay the bills, and my real life happens outside of that? Or can you imagine a career where, these 80,000 hours are also productively put to use to getting the best out of you, to helping you realize your maximum potential, and at the same time contributing back to society? So that's a conversation that we want to have. And when we're talking about impactful careers, I'm going to use this very simple definition of impact. And it is actually deceptively simple, but once you start thinking about it, it's very powerful, and it really is quite deep, which is ultimately we have an illusion sometimes, hey, we're doing these good things and this is somehow impact. Impact is ultimately about how much difference we are making to the world, right? So think of impact as, what is the world in which you exist? What does the world look like 15 years from now? We were thinking about your impact. What does the world look like 15 years from now because you're in it? Versus imagine a world in which you didn't do all the wonderful things you're going to do over the next 15 years. What would the world look like? So that delta, that difference between the world in which you're involved and doing all the things that you want to do to contribute, minus what would have happened anyway, it's that delta that's the impact. It's the difference you make in terms of real societal outcomes that matter. And those outcomes can be different. For some of you, the focus was climate. For others, it was inequality. For others, it was children. For others, it was gender empowerment. For others, it was inclusion, world peace, politics, health, medicine, whatever. But the idea is you actually want the world to be better because of you. Ultimately, that's what impact is. The other thing I would say is very often people associate the word impact with nonprofits, with social enterprises, with charity. And that is true. These are all powerful ways of having impact. But the reality is you actually, if you have the right frame of mind, you have the potential to have impact really in any job. So imagine, you are working at Amazon, right? And Amazon spends so much resources in shipping things around the world. And imagine you could help Amazon make its supply chain a little bit more efficient so that it needs a little bit more packaging, a little less packaging than is shown in this picture, which is a real picture of Amazon in Singapore. Just by mistake, I ordered ice cream online, and this is the amount of packaging that came just with a pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And if you were a planner inside Amazon planning their logistics, and you could help them come up with a new solution that uses less packaging but still is able to deliver the ice cream without it defrosting before it reaches the customer's house. And this is being done for millions of customers around the world. The small change that you made inside how Amazon works, multiplied by 1 million customers that order this product, that's a massive impact, right? So yes, you can have impact by going to rural areas, serving the poorest people and all of that, but you can also have impact going into a company like Amazon and making it a little bit more green. Or imagine you're working for Facebook or Meta, and or you're working for their Instagram department. There's a lot of research shows that too much use of social media is leading to a lot of mental health problems around the world, right? And if you were inside Meta, you were increasing the sensitivity of the company and everything that the engineers do inside the company in designing their products in a way that it helps those products cause less harm on the psychological well-being of teenagers around the world, for example. That's a massive impact. Again, Meta or Facebook, they do what they do. They develop the products to make money. But if you help them make money in a way that causes less harm to the society, that's also a massive impact. So the important thing here is in any career, including in a business career, which is the case for most of the students that I teach here at INSEAD, which are MBA students, there is opportunity to have impact. So, on this theme, what we'll do is we'll come to the case study for today, and we are going to use this case study as a means to discuss some of these issues that I have introduced. Because very often we find that, I could lecture for an hour, but a discussion very often is a much more effective way of for us, all of us, to appreciate the points that are being made. Very importantly, as I start, I want to be clear that when we use case studies, we are using these as a means of discussion. We are not here to judge the founder of Tom's on all the things he might have done wrong. We are not here to glorify the founder of Tom's for all the amazing things that we did. We are here to use Tom's as an example of a company that was trying to have impact while making money. And the founder, Blake Mayakovsky, was a well-meaning entrepreneur who set up the company, and see what he did, how he might inspire us to do similar things. At the same time, learn from his experiences, and with the benefit of hindsight, see what are the things that he did especially well, what are the things that, as we look back, we think, okay, he could have done differently so that the impact would have been perhaps even better than, what some of the outcomes are. So that's the purpose of the study. So take that in that spirit. Just to remind us, and I'm hoping most of you have read the case study, core to the Tom's model is this idea of buy one, give one. And especially they started with doing this with shoes. And what that means is you sell a pair of shoes to a customer, and out of the money you get from the customer, you use part of that money to cover the cost of a second pair of shoes that you give to poor children in one of the emerging markets around the world for free, in the hope that this is making a positive contribution to society. So that was the case study. Just to help us, remember the case a little bit more, let me see if I can play this very short video clip of the founder so that the case becomes a little bit more real. And let me.
Well, I admire you so much. You're an amazing guy.
Thank you so much.
You're an amazing guy. It's so nice to meet you.
You're an amazing woman.
Well,
so glad to be here.
Thank you so much for so this and I was reading a little bit of this back in my dressing room. Start something that matters. And your name is Blake, but the shoes are Tom's. And I know what this means, but explain why you call them Tom.
Yeah, it's confusing for people because when we started, the idea was, okay, if we can sell a pair of shoes today, we will give away a pair of shoes tomorrow. And then we were going to call them tomorrow's shoes, but I couldn't figure out how to fit tomorrow's on this little tag.
Right.
So I shortened it to Tom's, and people have called me Tom ever since. So I answer to both. Don't worry.
All right. But I know your name is Blake, so I'll call you Blake. And I love your shoes.
Thank you.
And I love the whole story of how you got started and what you just, but you've done this early on. You had done 3 other companies before you did this, so you just have that mind for business and for doing good.
Well, I think that the great thing about Tom's is that we make it so easy for people to do something. I think everyone wants to serve, they want to give back, but it's sometimes hard and it's difficult, especially with everything that's going on in the economy. And so we make it easy. You buy a pair of our shoes, we give a pair on your behalf to a child in need, 1 for 1, and we make it really easy.
And those are cloth, which I love.
Yes.
I like that. And they're good looking.
And they're comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when did you realize that this would actually work? Because it's one thing to have an idea, and then when did you all of a sudden go, oh, this is actually happening?
I'll never forget it. I was in the JFK airport in New York. It was about 5 months after I started. I had never seen someone wearing Toms before. Friends, family, interns.
Right.
And I looked down, there's this woman, and she has a red pair of Toms on. And so I have to ask her, right? And so I said, excuse me, I just love these red shoes that you're wearing. What are they? And she looks at me and her eyes widen. She goes, Tom's shoes. Now I'm trying to play it cool, right? So I'm doing the electronic kiosk. Well, she didn't like that. She literally grabs my shoulder, pulls me aside. She goes, no, you don't understand. This is the most amazing company in the world. When I bought this pair of shoes, they gave a pair to a child in Argentina. And there's this guy, he lives in Los Angeles. I think he lives on a boat. And I mean, she started telling me my life story word for word with like more passion than my mom tells me. I mean, and I knew at that moment, if this woman was going to stop what she was doing at an airport to tell what she thought was a stranger,
right,
that this was really gonna spread.
Yeah, because that is the good thing, is that you're doing good, but everyone who buys a pair is doing something good too. You're getting a cool pair of shoes, a fashionable pair of shoes, and you know that you're helping somebody else. It's just, I mean, why we can't do that with every single thing we buy?
I hope that's our goal at Tom's. I mean, we're looking at expanding the 1-for-1 model to many different products,
right,
so that people can, give back with all of their purchases.
Okay, so that was a brief introduction to Tom's. Let me see if I can close this window. And we're back here. And before we start a discussion, right? So the model, in the beginning, certainly, it looked like it was very successful. And by the time the case study ends by 2014, they had sold and given away an impressive 10 million shoes, right? So that is wow, if you look at the number. And they had also inspired a lot of other companies to come up with similar models of, buying a pair of, selling, a product, and then for every product that they're able to sell, they take some of the money and giving some of that product or a similar product to some community somewhere. So the main question that I want to use as an anchor for our discussion is, imagine somebody says, wow, what an amazing idea. And that we should be encouraging more and more businesses to just adopt this idea, right? Anytime they sell something, they should give something to the poor part of the world, right? So imagine that we are saying more and more businesses should be encouraged to adopt the buy one, give one idea that Tom's pioneered with shoes. And the poll that I want you to answer, and Shanae, please share that, is, would you agree with this idea that, pretty much every business should try to say, for anything that I do that makes me some money, I should give some of that money to some less fortunate people in the world. And if you remember, the case had a lot of nuanced discussion, so please take that into account as well as you're answering this question, that more and more businesses should be encouraged to adopt this model. I see we already have about half of the people that have answered, and while the remaining answers come in, can I request people, don't put your answer in the chat. The answer should be in the poll, but in the chat, write only if you're ready to be invited on the stage. And when you write, include your answer, yes or no, because we are going to invite a mix of people saying yes or no, and we are going to invite about 10 people, 5 yeses, about 5 yeses, 5 no. And so please put your name there only if you're ready to share. And what that means is you should have a computer with a video working and a good sound working, because otherwise it's a little disruptive if we invite you and people can't see you or hear you. So when you're answering, please also add you're ready to come on the stage. I want you to be explicit about that. So we are going to only call you if you're saying you're ready. Yes. So some of the people, so I already see some of the yeses that are saying ready, and we're going to invite some of you, but we'd also write some of the no's to say that you're ready, and we'll pick up a random number of you. So if you're saying no, but you want to be invited, please type again saying no, but say I'm ready. So we know that you'd like to come on the stage. We haven't seen anybody with a no saying I'm ready. Okay, good. So we have some of the no's as well. So we are going to invite a few of you to come in. In the meantime, I'm going to share the answers from the poll. So what we see is that about 3/4 of the people were leaning towards saying, yes, we should be encouraging more and more companies to do that. It's a great idea. But 1/4 of the people said, hang on, let's not get carried away and just make all the businesses do that. There might be good reasons to why we think that this model might not be globally applicable. So we'll stop there. People can see the results, right? You were able to see, here's once more, these are the results. 25% said no, 75% said yes. Shanae, are you able to get people in?
Yes. So if some of the folks who are ready, if you are ready and you have your, and you know that you have the bandwidth to be able to turn on your camera, please raise your hand and I will start inviting some of you on stage. All right. I'm starting to invite some folks on stage. So you will see an option to be promoted to panelist. Please accept that and turn your camera on.
Yeah, so I'm going to prioritize inviting people who I can see, because that's just nice. So while other people are coming in, Raja, can you please share your answer, yes or no first? And then I'd request everybody to keep the answer brief. Please don't give a longer speech, but just very focused on what was the main reason for you to say yes. So Raja, welcome. Thank you for being the first. It takes a lot of guts to come in first with 1,000 of your friends, but we are among friends, remember, so this is a safe learning space, so no need to be worried. So please unmute yourself and share your thoughts briefly, please.
Okay, can you hear me,
Yes,
Mr. Professor Jasjit Singh?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. It was so great. And thank you for the chance for me to give argument in this master class. I choose no. In my opinion, in the beginning, a little agree with the following statement. More and more businesses should be encouraged to adopt the buy one, give one idea that Tom's pioneered with shoes, because for the first time, it will attract people's empathy to know our positive brand significantly impacting people. It is called a cautionary tale. I'm reading the second reading from you, Mr. Jasjit Singh. And then on the other hand, Tom's story is not suitable for its sustainable business. So I assume it doesn't take longer for other businesses to make a real sustainable business with the same motive as Tom's company. In building a new business, we should know what real society needs are instead of focusing too much on the heartwarming story. So the company will have a good statement to make their brand continue to grow in the market. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, Raja. Shaiba, would you like to share what your point of view is? First of all, is that a yes or a no? Start with that.
It's a yes for me. And I think, thank you very much for inviting me on stage. I think that businesses in any way are going to make money. And so if through the business, the model to make money, there is an opportunity to give back to community, I think we should absolutely embrace it, because I was a beneficiary of the Tom shoes. I had a colleague that brought us Tom shoes in senior high school. And yes, the system is flawed, because I don't think that I was particularly someone that needed to get Tom shoes. There are people that needed it more than I did. But it is still a much more transparent way to do corporate social responsibility than to just have businesses that make money and then decide that, okay, we're going to use a chunk of this money, because sometimes you don't even know how much revenue they are making, and if the impact that they are making is equivalent to how much money they are making. So I think that it's much more transparent, and it's a better way to give back to a community, although there are a lot of things that could be done better with that model.
Thank you, Shaiba, for sharing that. So Raja says, it might not be sustainable. We should be focusing on real impact and what businesses are doing. Shaiba says, but hang on, do you want businesses to be just making money? This is a good way of giving back. You know exactly how much they're giving back because it depends on their sales. So even if this is not the best way, at least it's better than doing nothing. Joseph, what's your answer and what's your argument?
Okay, thank you very much. And my answer was no. I agree every company should have a form of corporate social responsibility. But to me, I believe that impact means different things to different people. So the model that Tom's used wouldn't be applicable to all companies or most of the companies. So I believe that every company, looking at the type of impact and kind of impact they want to do, should focus on that and make sure that they have real impact in their scope of field. Yet, so it's a no for me, but I agree that every company should get the opportunity to give back to the society or the community in which they operate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph, for sharing that. So you're saying, yeah, companies should be looking to make a contribution to society. It's not obvious that we would like all companies to be making impact. through this single model, which might be more suitable for some companies, but might not be suitable for others. Aditi, can you share? And ideally with your camera on, if you don't mind, we are among friends. It's just nice to see people, but if you can't turn it on, that's fine. You can just share what you have. And Shani, in the meantime, please feel free to add 2 or 3 more people if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for giving me this opportunity. My answer to your question would be a no. I choose no because giving the idea of taking the idea of the terms, I considered that if he is giving this, it's more likely to be a donation, not any a social impact. It will cause an impact for a short term period time, but if we see through it for a long period of time, it will not have a long term effect on the society. And also we say that at a point of a time, the donation or the impact they are trying to create will not actually go to the persons who actually needs them. At a point there will be a corruption, and the one who really needs them will be lack of them because of the flawed governance. So I said it's a no for me.
So Aditi, thank you for sharing that. So a very important point that Aditi raises is there's a difference between how much you're spending in trying to have impact versus how much impact that you actually are realizing. And very often what ends up happening is some of these initiatives end up focusing on, hey, we're giving so much away or we're giving so many shoes, and there's not enough focus on what are called the outcomes. You know, exactly what is it in terms of making society better. So, Jayanti, I'll take you next. Can I request anybody who answered no, please don't raise your hands anymore. If your answer is no, please lower your hands, because we'd love to hear people that gave the other point of view as well. But the ones that are already on stage will definitely hear you, irrespective of whether it's yes or no. But don't raise your hands if it's no. If all of these people are no, we might invite 1 or 2 with yeses. Jayanti, please go ahead.
So my answer is yes. The buy one, give one model helps businesses to contribute to social cause while maintaining profitability. It promotes corporate responsibility to CSR activities, benefits the unreserved community, and encourages consumers to support ethical brands like Crown.
Thank you. And you make an important point, because this is also about societal awareness. This is about getting consumers engaged. So it makes doing charity easier. A lot of the people who might not have given to charity, now they are able to give to charity. So even if it's not the most effective way, the fact that total amount of money coming into the sector increases, that can be a good thing. And the benefit of being able to do it through business, as Jayanti rightly points out, is normally if through a business model you're able to do good, the advantage is you can do good at scale. Because one of the biggest challenges if you're a nonprofit and trying to do good is, well, you can do only as much good as the money that you have. And when the money runs out, even if you have a lot of ideas, you cannot do more. While if you're a business, the way you do business, if that makes you money, then there is very often an opportunity to also have more impact. So we can see good arguments both ways. Let's just hear the last 2 people, and then we'll get on to the wrap up slides, because I don't think we'll have time for more. We would have loved to invite more people, but I apologize, we can't. But if you'd like to you give your one-line argument either for yes or no, please feel free to give it in the chat so that others can still see your argument, even if we don't get a chance to hear from you. John, please go ahead. And after that, I don't know if the first name is Marwan or what, but you go ahead. But John, you're first. And if you can, please do turn on your camera as well.
John, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Professor. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I hope I'm
audible enough. Is your camera working, John? If your camera is working, turn it on. But if not, that's fine. Just speak out. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, perfect.
I hope you can hear me now. All right.
Yes.
So
we can see you and hear you.
My answer is no. And I have a few reasons. First off, I don't see this model as a very sustainable one. And it does not actually work for all type of businesses, because I feel startups and entrepreneurs would actually struggle if such model is imposed on them, because to make profits and also to implement this model into their system will be quite difficult to, for startups. And I feel that, as my other colleagues have said, reaching out to the people that are actually in need would be very, very difficult. So it is easier because in this age that we are now, we have a lot of charity organizations, we have a lot of NGOs. We can, infuse ourselves into the SDG as the goals, sustainable development goals, and we can help by just collaborating with these organizations, other than companies taking it up upon themselves to do this, because one way or the other, the system is flawed and it will not always be as they have planned. So I don't think it's a model that will work for all companies. I hope you get my point. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, John. And you make some very important points, which is, well, on the one hand, the concern is it might not be sustainable, right? If the expectation is every single company is giving away, well, it might not be practical for all companies. And for certain kind of companies, like in the case of Tom's, what was happening was, well, the giving away of shoes substitutes for what they would spend on marketing and advertising and so on. So in this particular setting, they were able to make it work so that they were making money and also doing good, or at least trying to do good. But it's not clear that for all companies, this will pay back. And if it doesn't pay back, like John rightly said, it could be too much financial pressure. And even if a company is trying to do good, but if they're trying to do good, but they can't even make their finances work, it's not going to survive. And if the company is not even surviving, it won't be able to do good. That's a very good point. And the other point, again, this is something that others have also raised earlier. The question is not whether somebody's giving back a little bit of money. The question is, what are they achieving? And John suggests, one more way of achieving something that might also be financially more practical for a company, which is saying, okay, can we collaborate with others? See, what do we do well? We help them through our strengths in a way that is not putting too much financial burden on them. And yet it still helps through the collaboration with different kind of organizations to perhaps solve what are real societal problems. But importantly, we're starting with the problem. We are not starting with a mindset of it's just about giving a few dollars away. So thank you, John, for that. And the last person is, again, it's Marwan or Wad.
Can I share my opinion, Professor?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I guess I agree with this model because it seems more ethic and will attract a person who have a social responsibility. And also, I guess this model will win always because, it's give the business more loyalty and will attract the people who really have, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but I think, it shows their person specifically. This model shows their person.
Okay.
And
No,
thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's a reasonable point of view that indeed, at least for some of the companies, the model can work. And I think the challenge that some of the colleagues, the way to reconcile the yes and the no arguments is indeed that, the model can work sometimes. Done right, there can be a lot of impact. So, for example, when Tom's was later giving, money for cataract surgery, as the case mentions, the impact was more than initially what they were trying to do with shoes, because very often, like Shaiba mentioned, sometimes they were giving shoes to people who already have shoes. So that kind of impact wasn't enough. The impact can also be there if it's sufficiently integrated in the business model, that it's also, the business model is also contributing to society in a more fundamental way, and it's well thought out, and it can also, like Marwan Wad just mentioned, lead to positive impact if done right. So there's definitely a bit of tension here, and Tom certainly drew a lot of attention in its early years. It's impressive that over the lifetime it has actually given more than 100 million shoes. But certainly, as the case mentions, and I'm going to share my screen again to, wrap up some of that discussion, which you've already seen in the case study, there were also some concerns, right? Not all of them were obvious from the start, but certainly as the model unraveled over the years, several issues came up. The first was the question of how big a societal need is it? The first is, do all the people that are getting shoes really need shoes? So if Tom's ultimately ended up giving 100 million shoes, yes, it is possible that maybe 1 million of them or a few 100,000 of them really went to people who didn't have any shoes, for whom shoes was really a critical need. And, yes, those kids might not have been able to go to school, or might not have been able to, might have ended up having disease if they didn't have shoes. But the sense that people had was, it is not clear that most of the shoes were like that. And in fact, I have a screenshot here of a study on the right-hand side, which shows exactly that, which is that for most of the shoes that were given through donation programs, in this particular case, the study was done in El Salvador, it was not true that the people that were receiving the shoes were really looking critically for shoes or needed the shoes, which raises the second question. Well, if it wasn't a real need, very often it was also a question of, are the shoes even appropriate for the people they are reaching? How much are they improving life outcomes? Maybe the shoes, yeah, maybe if they found the shoes useful, that's fine. But was it one of their top 10, top 20 needs? And very often it wasn't. The third question that somebody mentioned was the sustainability. And it's the sustainability not just of the model, but broader sustainability about the impact, right? So if you're trying to do something, you don't want to just apply Band-Aid, right? The hope is that if you're going in a community trying to help them, you really are solving their problem for the long term. If you're just giving them a shoe today and the shoe breaks in 6 months and the child again doesn't have the shoe, you haven't really solved the problem for the long term. And then, of course, more recently, there's also this concern about environment. If you're creating all business models, and if all businesses in the world develop this mindset that for anything that we sell, we have to also give away that thing, even whether or not it's needed by anybody, that's going to create a lot of unnecessary consumption, a lot of waste. It's hard to imagine how bad that can be for the environment. So on the one hand, yes, we want businesses to think about contributing to society, but it's not clear that we want all businesses to think specifically about, hey, let's just give away stuff, because that has unintended consequences as well, which is the fourth point. If everybody started throwing free things around, here are some free phones, and here is some free clothes, and here are some free shoes, and you start dumping that, imagine what happens to the small and medium-sized local businesses and all the places which are getting these donations, because nobody can compete with free, right? And that leads to the unintended consequence, in this particular case, of potentially getting the local shoemakers out of business. It leads to the unintended consequence of creating a dependence mindset, potentially, because what is as important as making somebody have a sustainable living is somebody getting a dignified living, their sense of respect and dignity for each other, that they can make their own life. And so very often when we are trying to have impact, I don't think the mindset should be this, that, oh, these people, they don't have anything. For the next 50 years, we just need to keep on giving them something. The mindset should be, well, we are fortunate to be, living or born in a family or a place where we were able to, life was a little easier for us. And that's not true for a lot of people who might be born in a poor family or born in a place where the standard of living is not as high. So we should help our fellow human beings also achieve the best they can in life. But that's a very different mindset from saying, oh, we should just give away stuff to people who don't have it, and then these people will never be able to build their own lives themselves. So this is something that has been an evolution in the philanthropy or charity space, and that's something we see in the case of Tom's as well. On a lot of criticism Tom's comes under, credit to the founder of Tom's. He recognizes many of these challenges and he tries to make improvements, right? So one of the things he recognizes is that they have to be a little bit more humble in talking about their impact, right? So if not all the shoes are needed critically or going to the most extreme people, then we should not be making claims that that's what we are doing. If the shoes are leading to a culture of dependence, we should not be just throwing away shoes at people. And this is an example of then, Tom's working with one particular nonprofit. In this case, it's Gunj in India, a nonprofit that understands the communities better, works with the communities with much more sense of respect rather than with a sense of, oh, these are poor people, we just need to help them by throwing free stuff at them. In this particular case, Gunj integrated some of the giving programs with education programs they had with schools. And the children got the shoes not as a thing that, oh, here's something that we are giving you because you are poor people who cannot make your own life, but more as a reward at the end of an educational program with a sense of achievement, that they get a goodie bag at the end of the year when they've finished their school year and they've done well. As a reward, here's one more piece, which is done with respect in cooperation with the local nonprofits, and done in a way that the shoes themselves are more locally produced rather than being imported, so that you don't, cause the people that are making shoes locally to run out of business. Then, of course, Tom, as the case mentions later, tried other things like, can we get into other places where we can have impact? I mentioned cataract surgery. Access to water was another thing. They started to do things like, can we sell coffee? And with the money that we make, a portion of that goes to bringing access to water in communities that need most, in cooperation with the local water charities. Now, one of the challenges this ran into, and this goes a little bit more into the nuances of business, for a business model to work and have impact, actually, two things need to happen. The first is the program itself has to be impactful, which is, arguably programs for cataract and programs for water were more impactful in principle than programs for giving shoes to people who might already have shoes. But the challenge is it also has to work on the business side. And the challenge here was Tom's was a brand that was primarily about shoes. And so if a brand that's about shoes starts to sell coffee, and then it has a convoluted message like, oh, you buy our coffee and we'll give 1 week of drinking water to some community, that seems a bit roundabout. It's not easy Tom's will be able to sell coffee. And this is something that some of the people that came to the stage had mentioned, that there's also the sustainability of the business model. And that's something that Tom's unfortunately struggled with. Even as they tried to improve the impact, they couldn't make the business work. And so their revenues declined over time. And so, more recently, they've been trying to do things they moved away from the buy one, give one model, and they're moving away to other kind of business models where they feel they might be able to do impact and business at the same time in a more robust way. It is still work in progress, as is always the case in a lot of those initiatives. I give the founder a lot of credit for the humility and for the willingness to try. It just turns out in this particular case, the hiccups have been a bit harder than in some of the other cases, but there's still a lot to learn in hindsight, so that we do the good things that Tom's did, and we don't at the same time repeat some of the mistakes that they've done. But the broader point that comes out from this discussion is going back to our definition of impact to start with, right? So if you are really serious about having impact, rather than having this mindset of we are just giving money away or we are doing good things, it's important to start with what is the right problem. Have we done the needs assessment? What does society really need? What are the most important needs of society? And then, channeling the resources that you have in the most effective way towards doing things that try to solve this problem. And then in doing so, yes, the outputs are important, right? So when we use the word output, we are usually referring to the scale, right? We reached 1 million people, we used 10 million people. Yes, that's important, but it's also worth asking, yes, we reached 10 million people, but how much difference did we really make in the lives of each person? And that's a question of outcome, which is what changed. Did their lives become substantially better because we've given them a pair of shoes? Or are we just counting the number of pairs of shoes that we gave without really asking them how much life became better? And so the impact really has to be focused not just on the outputs, not just how many people you reached or how much how many of your items you gave away, but how much difference you ultimately made in somebody's life relative to what would have happened anyway. And that's, the definition of impact that we started with. And one of the things that, all of you pointed out was that what is indeed true is people have impact in different ways, right? And so one of the things that is important to emphasize is there's not one way of doing impact, right? You can contribute very differently. And that's why there are these multiple dimensions of impact, right? If you're working in a small nonprofit that's deeply integrated in a community, if you're working with a social enterprise that works with, let's say, a small group of the poorest farmers, you might be having really deep impact. What that means is the scale of the impact might not be large. You might be working with just 100 farmers, right? You might not be working with 1 million people, but you make so much difference in the lives of those 100 people that it's hard to argue that your impact is amazing. On the other hand, if you're in a large company like Walmart, or we were talking about Amazon or Facebook and so on, well, it's unlikely that for each of the users, you will completely transform their lives, right? Or each customer at Google, you'll completely transform their lives. But there, the real lever is the scale. A place like, a company like Google is like, a big tanker in the ocean. If you can even move the tanker a little bit, you achieved amazing things, right? Because the scale is so big that if you're in a company whose products and services are used by 1 billion people, even making a small difference for each of those people can really add up in terms of, the area of depth versus scale, if you think of that as a rectangle. And then the third dimension is the duration, right? If you went today and you did something in the community, you worked with the community for the next 3 months for the community to solve a problem that they have so that the problem is permanently solved. You build the capability of the community to be able to achieve something they were not able to achieve because you've transferred knowledge, you've given them access to markets, you've taught them the tricks, you've removed the hurdles that were there in their lives. Your impact might be really long-term and really durable. That is very different from, you gave a pair of shoes today, and the impact is there as long as the pair of shoes is there. When the pair of shoes breaks down, the impact just disappears. So different people have different kinds of impact, but it's worth thinking at least these 3 dimensions. And for some people, they're ambitious about scale. They might not care as about depth. Other people who get a lot of satisfaction from saying, okay, I'll stay in my village, but I'm going to make sure I help improve the lives of all the people that live in my village. Both of those are important kinds of impact, even if they are very different kinds of impact. But the broader point also to make here is very often, when we're talking about impact, we think from the heart, right? We are trying to do something good. And I think that's important. That's what brings your motivation. That's what gives you resilience to continue on your mission, even through the ups and downs. But what is also very important is the head, and this is a picture of Mr. Spock, who's the character from the original Star Trek. I don't know if anybody from your generation knows him. Certainly, most people in my generation know him. But he's the ultra-rational person in Star Trek, which is always thinking from the head, very logical, very data-driven. And it's the same thing in impact. In impact, you have to, on the one hand, be driven by passion, but you should not switch off your rationality. You have to also think, how do I channel my passion in a way where I make the most difference? And so just like business people are very careful in thinking about, hey, what is my strategy for making the most money? You have to think a little bit about what is my strategy for really having a lot of impact rather than only feeling good about myself that I'm doing something good for society, but maybe I'm not achieving that much, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So that goes back to, okay, so if there are different kinds of impacts, so what kind of impact should I pursue? And I would say, one should try to think of these, broadly speaking, these 3 things, which is the first is, very often people say, follow your passions. So I would say I partially agree with that. And the reason I say partially is your choices shouldn't be driven just by passion, But the passion is important, because if you don't have passion, you're not going to hang in there to really make a difference. But you shouldn't stop at just the passion and the goals. You have to also think on where is the overlap between what your passion is, what does the society really need, and then what is it that you can bring to the table that others cannot, right? So if you're really good at programming, right, it's useful to ask, okay, if I want to pursue a programming career, but at the same time I want to contribute to a particular, societal goal, what kind of companies and organizations can I go work for who do need my programming skills, but where my contributions as a computer programmer are going to help further the mission of a company on an important societal issue that I feel passionate about, right? So that's the mindset. So whatever skills you have, don't forget what are your skills, or whatever skills you at least would like to build for the future, and try to find an overlap between all of these. Now, what are the societal needs? So how do you even start learning about the societal needs? That's the last thing that I want to talk for the next 10 minutes or so. And I would say one natural place to start is just go on the website of what are called the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, right? That is essentially 17 big goals that the United Nations has decided. What that means is it has been practically decided through global conversations involving millions of people on what are the big challenges that humanity still faces that we need to address in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And here are some of the challenges. And the United, if you just Google, somebody's asking what is the website name, just Google Sustainable Development Goals. And the link is at the bottom here as well. And you will find them. They're sometimes just called SDGs. And if you go there, the important thing is if you click on any of these boxes, you will find a lot of information on what are the big challenges that society faces. And I'll give you a concrete example, right? So if you click on 3, which is goal good health, right, on that website, it will take you to many different sub-goals. And one of the sub-goals is in there is what can we do about maternal mortality? What does that mean? What that means is there's no reason that in this day and age, so many women around the world, especially in poor parts of the world, still die during childbirth, right? And I'll give you a statistic. In Singapore, and these numbers might be slightly out of date, but in Singapore, out of 100,000 children that are born, only 8 mothers die during childbirth. The same number in Nigeria is 917, about 100 times as much, right? So this is a very clear societal need that so many women are dying in Nigeria, when it is shown in a place like Singapore, as would be in many of the other developed countries with better statistics, that there's no fundamental reason why this should be happening. Today, the standard of healthcare is high enough that this number should be 1/100th of what it is in Nigeria. So what would it take for us to solve this problem? So this is, one of the examples. But more broadly, anytime you're talking about impact, if you're connecting the societal perspective, effectively, irrespective of which issue you're working on, you're ultimately in a space that what I call broadly sustainable development. What is sustainable development? So sustainable development, the United Nations definition of sustainable development, is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And what this definition highlights is that very often, we talk about social impact and environmental impact as 2 different things, but the 2 are actually interrelated. We want to find a way that people that are excluded today in terms of, their lives, their human rights, their economic well-being, their development, well, they deserve to have a better life. At the same time, future generations also deserve to have a better life, right? And which is why we have to take into account the environmental side and the limitation on resources of the earth and the carrying capacity of the earth. So environmental and social issues are really intertwined. And so the question arises, okay, how bad is the world, right? And sometimes you hear all gloomy news in the world and so on, but we really have to start not from our intuition or just what the news websites or just some random TikTok videos are talking about the world, but we should ground it in data. And so let's do 4 quick polls just to get a sense of how well do we understand the world really in terms of some fundamental things. So Shani, please feel free to start polling. You start the first poll. So the first poll that I want to ask people is just to give a sense of, very often a lot of the news is about poverty, right? So I want to ask the question, is the world really becoming worse on poverty, right? And so the question is, since 1990, the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has, and the choices are more than doubled, remained unchanged, or less than halved, right? And I see a lot of people are polling, and I'm going to wait for another 20 seconds. We have about 300 answers. If you'd like to give your answer, please give within the next 15 seconds. Then I'm going to stop the poll. So the question is, since 1990, the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has more than doubled, which means the world has become worse, remain unchanged, which means the world is about similar, less than halved, which means the world has become a bit better. So I'm going to end poll and share the results. So looks like 2/3 of the people think the world has actually become worse in terms of poverty. 16% of the people think the world is similar, and 19% of the people think it's actually better. And believe it or not, the right answer actually is C, which is the world is actually not worse in extreme poverty. Somehow the news and the social media and everything gives the impression that the world is actually worse in extreme poverty. But if you look at the data, and these are data from the World Bank, the amount of extreme poverty, which World Bank defines as $2.15 a day equivalent, that number has less than half. So the world is significantly improved. To a large extent, this is happening because of economic growth that has happened around the world, including through entrepreneurship and businesses and so on. The biggest of this, of course, is China. I would say more than half of the story is the China story, but it's not just a China story. This has happened across a lot of places. Now, having said that, it's important to recognize that poverty is not the same as inequality. And very often people confuse these two words. And so let's start the second poll. And the second poll focuses not on poverty, but on inequality. Poverty is about how poor are the poorest people of the world. Inequality is about saying what is the difference between the poorest people of the world and the richest people of the world, right? And this poll question is asking you a question on how big is the inequality. And one way to see how big the inequality is to say the total wealth owned by the richest 1% people, who are basically the millionaires, the US dollar millionaires in the world. There are about they constitute about 1% of the world's population. And the question is, how much wealth sits just in the assets of the richest 1%? Is it the equivalent of the bottom 25%? Is it the equivalent of the bottom 50%? Is the equivalent of the bottom 98%? So I'm going to give you the last 15 seconds to answer the poll, and then I'm going to pause the poll. But as I see, the numbers are roughly split across the categories. I'm going to give you just 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to pause the poll and share the results. So what I see is about 25% of you think that inequality is actually not too large. The richest 1% own the same as bottom 25%, which is, bad, but as not as bad as the other choices. 50% of you think it's 42%. And 31% of you think it is actually really extreme, which is top 1% own as much as the bottom 98%. And actually, the third group is indeed the closest. So the real numbers are the top 1% of the world own the same amount of wealth as the bottom 98%. It's actually even more than that. It's more than 98.5. It's somewhere between 98 and 99. It depends on exactly how you measure. But the message that is very clear is, yes, I mean, extreme poverty, of course, is still a problem, right? The fact that there's just a few 100 million people who are in extreme poverty, that's not just. That's still bad. Every person living in extreme poverty is a shame for humanity. But the fact that that number is, let's say 500 million today, and it was 2 billion 30 years ago, is an amazing achievement for humanity. At the same time, it's the ethical issue of inequality is massive, especially if you think about the fact that inequality also then additionally leads to very unstable society. So history has shown that once inequality crosses a certain threshold, the system becomes very unstable. You can't be a rich person living in a society where everybody else is poor and you're keeping on getting richer. At some point, there will be a rebellion, there will be a crisis in that society. That's just not a stable society, right? So this is a very important issue that, of course, we are working on as humanity, right? So extreme poverty, we made good progress. Inequality, we have a long way to go. Let me take the next example, which is global warming, right? And this is a part of course, climate change and environment more broadly. And some of you who are well plugged into the space, I hope you're aware of this issue. Others might be less educated on this, but very often the way global warming is measured is that normally Earth's temperature changes very, very slowly. That's what the history is, right? Tens of thousands of years pass by for the temperature to move even 0.1 degrees. But in the past 150 years since industrialization began, Earth's temperature has been warming up a lot. So it's useful to know these numbers because you will see people talking about it. Let's launch this poll. The question is, since the pre-industrial era, Earth is on average hotter by 0.7 degrees. That's question A. Choice B is about 1.1 degrees, and choice C is about 1.5 degrees. So Shane, please feel free to launch the poll whenever you can.
The poll is launched.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I see it now. So please answer the question. This time I'm not able to see the answers for some reason at my end. But yeah, I can see the question has been raised. So Shani, can you see how many answers have come in? Because for some reason this time I'm not able to.
Yep, we have 664. That's about
Okay.
7.
Yeah, so I think we can share the answers. And do you mind stopping and sharing the poll? Okay, great. Yeah, I see it. So 14% of the people said Earth is warmer by 0.7, 31% said Earth is warmer by 1.1, and 55% said Earth is warmer by 55%. Actually, the second group is correct. So Earth is actually warmer by 1.1 degrees Celsius. This is how the picture looks like. It's very important, and I think what might have confused some people was that the number of 1.5 degrees is very often in the news. 1.5 degrees is a critical threshold that the scientists talk about. And this was agreed in the Paris Agreement globally in 2015. Which is humanity as a whole, scientists say, should try their best to limit global warming, ideally to 1.5 degrees or not too much more than that, and certainly to below 2 degrees. So the 1.5 degree number comes and is very often in the news, not because that's where we are already, but that's where we are at a risk of being pretty soon in terms of all the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that were released in the atmosphere to a large extent through burning of fossil fuels like petrol, gas, or coal. And the important point is we have a relatively short window left to keep global warming under 1.5 degrees and certainly under 2. And that's why climate change has become a very critical issue. Let me ask the last question. And as you'll notice, all of these questions are a little bit tricky, right? And these are questions we take for granted that, most people should know about. But the reality is, you shouldn't feel bad that you're getting these answers wrong. The MBA students get it wrong. I talk to senior managers, they get it wrong. The first time I was learning about these numbers, I got this wrong. And this comes from the fact that a lot of times we base our decisions on incomplete and poor information, not on real evidence, but on what we hear from social media or, rumors we hear. And that's just a very inappropriate approach of thinking of the world, because if our view of the world is wrong, we can't contribute to fixing the world. So let's have this last poll come up as well. And what the poll says is, and it's very important to look at the words, because as you might have noticed, a lot of my questions are trick questions. Since 1990, annual per capita carbon dioxide emissions, right? So when we talk about per capita carbon dioxide emissions, what we are talking about carbon dioxide emissions per person for the world have gone, not for the world as a whole. So it's not total emissions. Remember, the population has gone up. So annual per capita carbon dioxide emissions for the world have more than doubled, gone up only slightly, or less than halved. And I see people are polling. I'm going to wait another 10 seconds and see where people are. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm going to end poll share results. So 2/3 of you thought, greenhouse gas emissions per capita have more than doubled. About 1/3 of you thought they've gone up slightly, and only 7% of you thought they've less than halved. The real answer is actually gone up only slightly, right? So in particular, look at the light brown line in the picture that you see on the right. That's the third line from the bottom. Now, what does this mean? I want to be very clear. This doesn't mean that is good news. It's actually pretty bad news. But what I've said is, on a per person basis around the world, emissions are constant. But the population is increasing. What that means is that total emissions per year has gone up over time, which is a problem. Even if it had remained constant, it's a problem. And the reason for that is the way carbon dioxide emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions like methane or nitrous oxide work is they go up in the air and they stay up in the air for a long time. And so what that means is you have to think of the atmosphere as a little bit of a bathtub, and the carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions as water you're pouring in the bathtub. And what's happening is every year we are pouring more water into the bathtub. In fact, we are pouring more water at a faster rate for humanity as a whole, even if not on a per person basis. And what that means is the bathtub is becoming more and more full. What that means is temperature is increasing. Now, going back to my previous slide, if we really wanted to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius, what does that mean? That means we have to, first of all, stop filling the bathtub. We have to go to zero emissions. There's no other answer. Net zero emission, not only do we need to do that, then we need to go to negative emissions. What does that mean? That means we have to start taking water out of the bathtub. We need to start reducing emissions. We have to increase the amount of forests that we have. We need to preserve the forests. We need to start having less emissions from fossil fuels. We need to have technologies that remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And that's a big challenge. And that's actually one of the biggest challenges humanity has ever faced. And the scientists today are saying that needs to be done by 2050, right? So if you're passionate about climate, that's a very, very important space that your generation can be working in. And that needs social scientists, that needs people in ethics, that needs natural scientists, that needs business people, that needs policymakers. Everybody needs to work here. Now, I want to explain a little bit about the per capita emissions piece. What is happening is the rich countries are actually emitting, historically, they have emitted much more than the poor countries. And this raises questions about climate justice. So we need to reduce emissions, but the burden for reducing emissions is ethically much more on the richer countries. And the burden on making sure that the poor countries are able to continue to have progress on their development track also lies with people that have done more emissions in the past, because you can't say, Kenya shouldn't develop or India shouldn't develop or even China shouldn't develop. The question is not that development should not happen. The question is development needs to happen in a way that has been different from the way it has happened in the past, which has been driven by fossil fuels. Now, the next question is, why is it that emissions are falling for United States or UK on a per capita basis? And the reason for that is the green transition, right? So a lot of the electricity historically in places like UK and US as well was generated from coal. We have moved away from coal, so that has reduced emissions per capita. But it hasn't reduced it nearly enough. Why? Because the consumption per capita has actually gone up. So what that means is, on the one hand, we made a lot of progress, but that progress has been undone because we still continue to consume a lot more. So total emissions keep on going up, in addition to the fact that the population is growing up. But what that shows is that there's a ray of hope that if we can control the consumption while at the same time continue to green the economy, in particular the source of energy, then we are making good progress. But the thing to really worry about is that progress isn't being made right now in big countries like India and China, which are on an upward development path. And that progress needs to happen a lot faster in countries like India and China. We can't stop their development. We shouldn't stop their development. Why should anybody, any human being on Earth not have the chance to live a good life? At the same time, the development path has to be such that we have to take the per capita emissions, even in places like India, China, Kenya, and for that matter, all the developing world, and make sure that as their GDP per capita is going up, the emissions per capita are not going up, right? This is very critical. So that's why it's a global effort where all countries need to do a part. And on the one hand, reducing per capita emissions overall, reducing them, them across the board, green the economy, reduce overall consumption. So it requires, it's not one magical solution. It requires a combination of solutions. And very importantly, it requires a global cooperation at a scale that humanity has not done before. And that's why, climate change really is a global issue, which will not get resolved unless people are working across countries to figure out what is the ethically just way for humanity as a whole to meet the needs of the present situation, generation in an equitable way, while also, thinking of the future generations. So, but the broader message again is something that, is described in one of the articles that I read by a person called Max Roser. And, similar points are made in these two amazing books, which I very strongly encourage you to read. One of the books is called Factfulness. The other is called Not the End of the World. And the focus in both of these books is on saying, okay, before we make any plans on how we are going to contribute to the world, it's important for us to make sure that we understand the world. And most of us do not have accurate understanding of the world, especially because we are these days living in a world where we get our news from TikTok and social media. We see news articles that are worst case articles, and we do not have a balanced view of the world. We have to go back to what are the facts, what is the science, and where do we start with, and how do we make progress? And that's very important. And the mindset that we need to adopt is what I'm going to call urgent optimism. What does that mean? That means there are some people in the world who are complacent. They don't care. They say the world is fine. In the past, free markets have solved all the problems. They're going to still solve the problems. Innovation, technology is going to solve all the problems. We don't have to worry about it. I think that view is too extreme. That's too dangerous, right? It is not true that there are no problems. The world is actually awful. And when we say the world is actually awful, means we face a lot of major problems. There's still hundreds of millions of people, who live in extreme poverty. There's still hundreds of thousands of children who are dying from diseases like diarrhea or malaria, and that shouldn't happen. So the world still needs to become a lot better. At the same time, it's important to realize that the world actually is much better than where it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago on a lot of dimensions. You know, we used to have this big problem 30 years ago. Everybody used to talk about the ozone layer and how, you know, the damaging, the big hole in the ozone in the atmosphere is going to lead to major crisis. But because of global action, international cooperation, innovation, policy tightening, that problem got resolved. And I think we can do that the same on issues like inequality, climate, and so on as well. And so this is about saying, on the one hand, we should not ignore on the big issues. On the other hand, we should not get into complete gloom, right? You will hear a lot of news about, oh, the world is just finished. You know, climate is going to be a disaster. There's no way we can prevent 3 degrees warming. You know, corporations are greedy. So there's nothing to be done. It's game over. That's not true. The world is much better on a lot of ways than it was in the past. And so in other ways also, if we take action, the world can become much better. So, and this is where leaders like you come in, right? You have to have urgent optimism. You have to be positive, but grounded in data and a sense of urgency and saying, we can make things better. We are not going to go to the one extreme and saying everything will fix itself. We won't go to the other extreme and saying nothing can be fixed. The world has its positive things, the world has its negative things, and we are going to continue to make things better. So with that, you know, I'll come to my last slide, and I'll just make these two, you know, quotes to perhaps inspire all of us a little bit. The first thing is to say, yes, you know, all of us, I'm hoping, you know, have careers which are financially secure careers where you have enough money for yourself, your family, you have a good life. But at the same time, you know, you're thinking about your full potential and not just about making money. I hope you make lots of money. All of you, I hope, become rich. But I also want you to be successful in other ways, in really realizing your best self, in contributing positively to the world, while also doing well for yourself financially. So I want you to have broader ambition than just saying you want to have a good life financially. That's included, but you know, it's much more than that. And the other thing that I want to say, you know, just in a halfway joking way, you know, it's very easy for us to think, hey, I'm one single person living in this place with limited resources. How much can I do to the world, right? If you get into that way of thinking that you can't make an impact, you don't matter, that's just not true. Think about this. Think about, if you think you're too small to have an impact, try going to bed with a mosquito in the room. And those of you who've seen a mosquito in the bed, in the room, know that it's very difficult. Even with a single mosquito can have so much impact. If a single mosquito can have so much impact, I'm sure you can have a lot more impact than that mosquito. So I'm sure all of you, you know, are already talented people, and I hope the program you're in, the Aspire program, will help you go on and do even bigger things and have a lot of impact, have good life for yourself, do great things for your country, but also at the same time, you know, think of the world as well, rather than thinking of countries as just competitors or even worst case enemies, or think of, you know, the humanity as a whole and connecting and being positive about building a world that's, you know, peaceful, just, and working towards that positive vision of the world through your careers. And I'm really hoping and expecting that, you know, with people like you, the world is in good hands. So let's keep working on it. And it will always be a work in progress, but that's fine. That's what challenges are for. You know, there are always new challenges, and I'm sure through your effort you'll continue to overcome them. So thank you, and thank you again to Aspire Institute also for the opportunity. As always, it's always fun talking and to the new generation and seeing, you know, so much activity and enthusiasm to make a positive difference. So good luck to all of you, and back to Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Singh. And thank you for a wonderfully insightful session. I know this is a a lot of what we talk about is a bit of career readiness and, readiness for them to figure out what exactly they want to do in life and how exactly they want to become a leader. So something like this, like pursuing something impactful, pursuing something that you're passionate about, is inspiring, not only to me, but to the students as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course. So with that, we will go ahead and close out the session. We will be sharing the attendance link in